Law 34. Be royal in your own fashion. Act like a king to be treated like one. The way you carry yourself will often determine how you are treated. In the long run, appearing vulgar and common will make people disrespect you. For a king respects himself and inspires the same sentiment in others. By acting regally and confident of your powers, you make yourself seem destined to wear a crown. And quite coincidental that we're covering a law on being king-like and how to be treated like one when I just covered Elliot Hulse's King and animated that book on what I think is one of the best, it is the best video on my channel at this moment, that King animation. So I highly recommend you checking it out. And I do think it's one of the best animations, book animations on YouTube. I confidently say that and believe it, and will happily accept a challenge, if you think differently, post in the comments of what you think is better and why, and then we'll see. But regardless, Elliot Hulse, one of my biggest influences and mentors, and so I highly recommend you check that out after you check out this law. Observance of the law. So most people have heard of the famous explorer Christopher Columbus. We're going to explore a story of how he executed this law very well. So when Columbus was trying to fund these journeys and voyages across the world, and people would believe he came from Italian aristocracy. Even in his son biography of him, after his death, his son would note that he was descendant of these famous legendary Roman generals. But it wasn't true. There was nothing but an illustrious fantasy for which Columbus had created. Columbus was actually a son of a humble weaver who had opened up a wine shop when Christopher was young. That's all. His father he made his living selling cheese. And then Christopher Columbus created the life he did on the back of a fantasy he created. This fantasy was the myth of his noble background. Because early, he felt that he was destined for great things. He had this ego, he had this bravado, he had this confidence about himself and who he was and what he wanted to do in his life. So accordingly, he thus acted as if he was descended from this noble line of legends and kingship. Now here's a really important part of the story. So Columbus had actually managed to get a meeting with the King of Portugal, and the King of Portugal was trying to discover a shorter route to Asia. And Columbus and him discussed this, and Columbus requested certain rights to the lands, 10% of the future commerce within the lands, etc., etc. Certain little deals he was trying to conjure up. Even though Columbus had only been a merchant, he knew almost nothing about navigation. He never led a group of men, and he had pretty much no qualifications for this journey, for this sailing that he proposed. The King of Portugal ended up politely declining the offer, but this left the door open for future opportunities. Even though the king declined Columbus's demands, he treated him as legitimate. He didn't laugh at Columbus, he didn't question his background and credentials. In fact, the king was so impressed with the boldness of Columbus' requests that he felt comfortable in the company of a man who acted so confidently. And this confirmed Columbus's instincts that he was correct, like that he's on the right path. If you can conjure up a meeting with a king based on sheer audacity and perseverance, and you can translate this to right now, if you can conjure up a meeting with someone successful in your field, someone who you admire based on sheer audacity and bravado, then you might just have something. Your character might just be something special. By asking for the moon, he had instantly raised his own status, for the king assumed that unless a man who set such a high price on himself were mad, which Columbus did not appear to be, it must somehow be worth it. He moved to Spain using his Portuguese connections. He elevated his way into the circles of the Spanish court. He gave demands to many different individuals, many different influences, but they couldn't help him for certain reasons of power and money and other little reasons. Columbus didn't stop. Columbus persevered. And then he soon realized Queen Isabella was probably the perfect person to help him. So he managed to get a meeting with her, but he couldn't manage to actually convince her to finance the voyage, but he completely charmed her. After eventually some time passed and the war passed, Isabella finally responded to his demands, and she decided to pay for 3 ships, equipment, and all these other things Columbus needed for his voyage. He set off on his first voyage, but but he was unable to find the passage to Asia like he had originally tried to. But when Columbus petitioned to the Queen to finance an even more ambitious voyage, the following year she agreed, as she had come to see that Columbus was destined for great things, and the rest is history. Everybody knows Christopher Columbus. Interpretation. The thing is, Columbus didn't know more than the average sailor about ships. He wasn't special in regards to his skill set towards sailing. But there was one area where his skill set was sublime, was superior, and that was his character and his understanding of how to behave with people. He knew how to sell himself. He had an amazing power to charm and ability, and it all came from the way he carried himself, projecting himself with a sense of confidence that was completely out of proportion with his means and with his actual history, with his actual life. But his confidence wasn't aggressive and ugly. It was quiet, calm, and self-assured. So when they saw Columbus, they felt an instant affinity for him because he carried himself the way they did. And this elevated him above the crowd, and he was able to fulfill his destiny for greatness. And here's the moral. Here is the principle from that 5 minutes of talking from the story. Understand, it is within your power to set your own price. How you carry yourself reflects what you think of yourself. If you ask for little, shuffle your feet and lower your head, people will assume this reflects your character. But this behavior is not you. It is only how you have chosen to present yourself to other people. You can just as easily present the Columbus front, buoyancy, confidence, and the feeling that you were born to wear a crown. This idea of fake it till you make it, well, it's kind of real. Columbus did it. He did it in the best way he knew how, and he ended up voyaging, discovering, colonizing the world. Keys to power. As children, we start our lives with great exuberance. We start ourselves dreaming, expecting and demanding everything from the world. And this generally carries over into our first touches into society, into modern society, as we begin our careers. But as we grow older, as we fail, as we fall, as we're challenged, we experience these boundaries that they only get firmer with time. And then we come to expect less from the world. We accept limitations that are really self-imposed. We start to bow down and scrape and apologize for even the simplest of requests. There's a lot of people that unfortunately fall down this path. Now this is obviously not something I adhere to. This is a path that many unfortunately do fall down though. They accept their circumstances. But the solution to such a shrinking of horizons is to deliberately force ourselves in the opposite direction. To downplay the failures and ignore the limitations and make ourselves demand and expect as much as we did as a child. But how do we accomplish this? We must use a particular strategy upon ourselves. Robert calls this the strategy of the crown. The strategy of the crown is based on a simple chain of cause and effect. If we believe we are destined for great things, our belief will radiate outwards. Our words become our actions become our habits. So just as a crown creates an aura around a king, then this outward radiance will affect the people around us in a positive way. And these people will think we must have reasons to feel so confident. You're walking around with this imaginary crown. You feel no inner sense of limitations to what you can do and what you can accomplish because you feel unstoppable. And once you've harnessed that, oh man, once you can really feel you can take on this world, once you really feel like you can do anything, then it's over. You're done, right? The universe just got to get out your way from there at that point. It's already done. The way I started that is I said if we believe we are destined for great things, our belief will radiate outwards. Now, saying that reminds me of the book The Secret. Now, I haven't read The Secret, but I've heard that it just talks about kind of just believing in yourself. Really, it's just kind of just thinking you can do it. It skips an important part. That's the execution, actually taking action off everything that you believe. But don't get it twisted that this is only talking about just a false belief, just talking about just thinking. It's more than that, because it's this idea of believing you are destined for great things so you can set yourself up to execute. It's like this. It's like your thoughts become your words become your actions become your habits become your character, and then what's after that? Your character becomes your destiny. That's exactly what we're saying here. You know how people say you can do anything? You know how your parents say, oh, hey Johnny, hey Susie, hey Jessica, you can do anything. You can do anything you want in this world. You want to go get it. right? A lot of us say that. I used to say that a lot. I used to say that a lot and repeat it to myself, but reflecting on that, I never really 120% believed it. I didn't know what it felt like to really believe I can do anything until I went to Hawaii. But long story short, I was in Oahu and I was traveling, and I ended up climbing up this waterfall, up the side of a waterfall. You can't even imagine, off this beaten path, following this climber who we had just stumbled upon. It constantly got harder and harder and steeper. We got to a point where we were climbing vertical walls, hanging onto the roots. It was pouring down with rain. You couldn't imagine. It was like a movie. And here's the thing. I don't like heights. Well, I didn't like heights. I used to not be comfortable with heights at all. I used to be that kid when you're on school camp and you have to do some abseiling, and I'd be shitting myself at 10-20 meters in the air, and I couldn't do that stuff, right? So I didn't like heights, yet I still did this. And we do it. We get all the way to the top of the waterfall, and I'll show some photos of what it looked like at the top. And once we reached the top, it was kind of a euphoric feeling. We're at the top. It's like 100 so meters or so above the bottom of the waterfall. And we're looking across, and it's an incredible view. You just see the treetops, the water's cascading down, and you look over and you're just silent. You're just breathing, and you're just feeling the moment. You're just in awe of complete awe of what's happening and what you just did. And then in that moment, I realized, if I can conquer such a fear in such a way that I did of heights,